Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by thedrumshed.com. In today's lesson, we're going to be digging in even farther with some more syncopated bass drum patterns. Up until this point, we've been lining our bass drum up with the hi-hat for every note that it plays. Our hi-hat's our grid, and our bass drum is lining right up with it in unison whenever it plays. In order to take your playing to the next level, you want to be able to put that bass drum anywhere in the bar you want, including in between the hi-hats. So what we're going to be working on in today's lesson is getting that bass drum to fall in the cracks in between those eighth notes that we've been playing on our hi-hat. In addition to that, we're going to start to use some fills that have a little bit more dynamic interest. Now, dynamics mean how loud or soft you play. And this is something that a lot of drummers miss when they're first starting out. Whenever they go for a fill, they just play full on, real loud, and real big. Now, if you've listened to any variety of music, you know that not all sections of a song are big and loud. There's quiet sections and there's louder sections. And since our fills connect different sections of the music, we want to be able to have fills that go both ways. We want to have fills that build up into big sections like choruses. And then if the band really thins out its texture down to maybe like just a guitar and a bass and the keyboards drop out or whatever instruments happen to be playing, we want to be able to drop our fill intensity level down to match what the other musicians are doing. So after we talk about some of those syncopated bass drum patterns, we'll get into that and then we'll combine it all together in a couple examples at the end. All right, here we go. So the first pattern I want to show you guys today is a simple single note bass drum that falls in between the hi-hats. So we're going to take our very first beat that we learned in our first lesson, the kick, snare, and we're going to add one additional note that falls in between the hi-hats. And in this first example, we're going to put that note on the of 1. Now, if you're unfamiliar with counting 16th notes, we can fit 4 16th notes in a given beat. So the way we count that is 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Now, if that sounds confusing, what I find helps a lot of guys that are working on this is think of each beat as a drawer. And you can only fit so much in each of those drawers. And how many notes you can fit in each drawer depends on the size of the note. If you put a big note, like a quarter note in, it's going to take up all of beat 1 or all of that drawer. If you use a smaller note, like an eighth note, like what we use on our hi-hat, you can fit 2 of those in each drawer. You end up with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, which we've been doing a lot with in previous beats. 16th notes are even smaller. You can fit 4 of those in each drawer. 1 E and a, 2 E and a. We've used those actually in previous lessons on some of our fills, but today we're going to be talking about them with our bass drum. So the first syncopated bass drum that we're going to use is on the of 1. So we're going to use that 4th 16th, 1 E and a. So this bass is going to come after our second hi-hat hit of the measure. So what we'd have is something like this. 1 and a, 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, something to be really careful of. When you start to put these bass drums in between the hi-hats, our hi-hat loves to follow our bass drum. In all the beats we've played up until this point, we've been lining up that bass drum with our hi-hat. They love to play together. When you walk down the street, your hands and your feet move together. So when your brain fires that signal to your foot to play on count it zooms past that right hand, and the right hand wants to jump in and play too. Now, this can give a lot of guys a big headache when they're working on this at first. So I'm going to give you a couple tips to try to get past that initial wanting that hi-hat to sneak in. If it does sneak in, it'll sound something like this. So this is what you want to watch out for. 1 and a, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and a. That extra note sneaking into the hi-hat on a. Now, a lot of times you won't even realize that that's happening when you're playing. That's why recording yourself when you're practicing is a really, really excellent way to double check and make sure that something's not happening that you're not aware of. So if you run into that problem of that hi-hat wanting to play with your bass drum, first thing you can do, and first thing you should always do if you're having problems with any sort of syncopation pattern, is slow it down. Take it as slow as you need to give your brain time to say, bass drum play, right hand don't. So you might take it really slow. You might go crawlingly slow like this. 1 and a, 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right, so if you need to take your pattern that slow, do it. Don't feel like you need to play things fast right away. I know it sounds cooler faster, and everyone wants to play these patterns at ripping tempos right out of the gate. But you'll be able to get to those faster tempos sooner if you take the time and do them a bunch of times in a row at these slower tempos first. If you play them at a faster tempo and mess them up 10 times and then get it right once, guess what? You just practiced 10 times incorrectly and correctly one time. What are the chances you're going to play it right the next time? 10 to 1, you're going to mess it up. If you take it so slow that you can't mess that bass drum up, and you play it 5 times in a row and maybe mess it up once, 5 to 1 odds, you're on your way to playing it with the correct pattern the next time you do it. So take it slow first, then speed it up. I know it's hard, but trust me, take the time in the beginning and you'll get to those faster tempos way sooner than all the guys that are racing through these things the first time. All right, so on that note, let's take this pattern at 2 tempos. Now, again, if you need to go slower, do it. Go down to 60, take it as slow as you need to. But for today, let's take our first pattern at 80 beats per minute. Here we go, 80 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. Once you get that down, start to bump that metronome up. Move it up maybe 5 beats per minute at a time. For today, let's take it at a bit faster tempo. Let's go all the way up to 120 beats per minute. This is a great goal for most of your beats when you're first starting to learn them, because as I've said before in previous lessons, a lot of popular songs tend to be at around 120 beats per minute. So let's take example 1 at 120. 1, 2, ready, go. For our next example, let's move that pattern that we were using on beat 1 to beat 3. Beats 1 and 3 are kind of sister beats. Our snare drum's been falling on 2 and 4, and in most rock music, that's where the snare drum's going to be falling. And 1 and 3 in a lot of our easier beats tended to be the same thing. So let's just flip-flop those. Let's take the 1 and make it 3 . So now what we're going to end up with is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if it's easier for you to think of it this way, think bass, snare, bass, bass, snare. Bass, snare, bass, bass, snare. Again, watch out that that hi-hat doesn't follow the bass drum when you add that of 3. Let's take it again at 2 tempos, 80 beats per minute and 120. For our next pattern, let's move that bass drum over to the 16th note that we haven't used yet. We've been using the of 1 and 3 in our previous examples. Let's move it over to the E, the second 16th. And let's also move it to a different spot in the bar. We're going to move it to beats 2 and 4. So for our first example, we'll put it on beat 2. And since it's on the E of 2, it's going to fall right after we play our snare drum on beat 2. So again, make sure your hi-hat's not following that bass drum when you do it. But let's take it at a really slow tempo just to show you how that's going to fall after that snare drum on 2. Here it is at a really, really super slow tempo. 1, 2E, 3, 4. 1, 2E, 3, 4. Now, let's take it at 2 different tempos. Let's take it at 80 again and then up at 120 beats per minute. Now let's do the same thing we did before. Let's swap what beat we're playing that E on. Instead of playing it on 2, let's move it over to 4. Let's have that bass drum on the E of 4. So again, let's do this at 2 tempos. Let's do it at 80 and 120. Here we go. So once you get those patterns down, we can start to add additional notes to the bar. Instead of just having that really simple quarter note in between, you could get into playing some additional eighth notes. Now this is just the first step in this process of adding more syncopated bass drum patterns. Feel free to try those E's and U's in every spot that you can think of on the bar. Put 2 of them in a bar. Mix them up with eighth notes. Today what we'll do is I'll give you 2 examples, one adding 1 additional eighth note, and the second adding 2 additional eighth notes. For now, we'll just keep the syncopation to 1 beat per bar. So for the first example, let's keep the bass drum on the of 1, just like we had in example 1. But when we get to beat 3, instead of just playing a quarter note, we're going to play 2 eighths. So what we'll end up with is 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can hear that 3 and is where we added that extra eighth note. So let's hear that at 2 tempos. For our last example, let's go even further. Let's add 1 more eighth note into the mix. Let's take example 4, where we had our bass drum on the E of 4, and then let's add 2 eighth notes to that original pattern. The original pattern was 1, 2, 3, 4E, and to that, let's add a bass drum on the and of 1 and the and of 2. What we'll end up with then is 1 and 2 and 3, 4E. 1 and 2 and 3, 4E. Let's hear that at 2 tempos. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. Please like and subscribe to keep up on all the new lessons and reviews. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and leave a comment below letting us know of any new lessons or reviews you'd like to see in the future. Also, if you enjoyed the lesson, please consider donating to thedrumshed.com to help fund future lessons. Just click the donate button on the main page of our website, and thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the shed.